Wanted to welcome you all this evening to our college admission and application process meeting. We have a couple for this meeting tonight. It's designed to be an overview of the application process. There's an understanding that, well, many of you are probably near the same place in terms of this process right now. Some of you may be at different spots along the way. Our goal this evening is to kind of familiarize you with all of the aspects of this process, with the understanding that when you have your senior conference, that's when it will be more personalized and individualized for your needs. So I do want to let you know that the presentation that we're going to show you this evening does have some screenshots and some images. It's not designed for you to write everything down right now and have to remember every word that we say, because we will have this available online for you by tomorrow on the website. And so those screenshots and images will be a good resource for you at that time. This evening, we're going to cover a few topics. Our first topic, we're going to go over the common application procedures and all the steps in that process. And then we're going to transition to Naviance Family Connection and how those two connect and communicate with each other and the process for applying to colleges. And then our third topic will be the formalizing and finalizing the teacher recommendation process. We do have a few assumptions. This presentation is designed assuming a few things are completed. If not everything on this step is completed, it is okay, but just keep in mind that we're assuming some of these things are done. So at this point, we have an assumption that you have a list of schools, and that list of schools ranges, including your reach, your target, your likely schools. You have ascertained that you've met all the requirements needed to meet the application deadlines, and you've spoken to at least 2 teachers for recommendation. This evening, I've asked 2 of our school counselors to assist in the presentation. Our school counselors spend countless hours working with families and students through this process year after year. They also spend a significant amount of time speaking with colleges, admissions officers, attending trainings to understand the nuances and the changes regarding the Common App, as well as Naviance. And they're extremely collaborative in terms of sharing resources. So although they all have their own personal personality traits, you can ensure that you're getting a consistent message and consistent information when you meet with them. Now, having said that, there are 2 counselors that are here tonight. First is Mrs. Elizabeth Tully-Chano, who will be presenting on the Common App first, and then Miss Lisa Coubert, who will be going over Naviance Family Connection. There is one person who is not with us tonight, but I do want to point out, her name is Mrs. Megan Beatty. She's our college and career assistant. She's a full-time employee in the school counseling department, and she is a great resource for any questions that you may have related to this process, whether you are ahead of what we're going over now or not yet up as far ahead on some of these procedures. She is always available and accessible, and she is available in room A110 here at the high school, and she does have access through electronic email as well, and she is definitely someone that I would recommend reaching out to with questions. Having said that, I'd like to now turn it over to Ms. Tully-Chano to talk about the Common Application.
Good evening. I think we will first start with the Common App. And this is usually the first starting place for students when they're applying to college. The Common App is a standardized application that's accepted by over 600 colleges and universities. And this is also where we will need to start when talking about Common App communicating with Naviance here at the school. Just a couple tips also. We're not going to get into the details of each of the individual sections of the Common App tonight. However, there's a couple things I recommend. First, before you submit your applications, that's something the student is going to do on their own at home. What I highly recommend is that before you hit the submit button, you print out a preview and you go over that. And you have people look at that who have not been looking at it. So you have a new set of eyes going over it. It's amazing how when you look at the same thing over and over again, maybe the same 3 people in your household, you'll miss very simple things, spelling or, filling in certain sections. Okay, so the first part that's very important for Chatham High School to send out documents on your daughter or son's behalf is that we need to get the Common App to speak with their Naviance account. So to start with that, how many people in the room, I'm curious, how many people have started a Common App account so far? I see by a show of hands. All right, that's excellent. If you have not started a Common App and you plan to apply to colleges through there, I highly recommend you do that very soon. And also, even if you're not applying to any colleges on the Common App, we still need you to create a Common App account. And it's usually schools that don't use the Common App or large state universities, but we still need you to create a Common App account. So once you have started an account on Common App, there are 3 sections that are key for you to complete before you're able to get the FERPA statement to release that will help us connect Naviance to Common App. And those are the profile, the education section, and then you need to add at least 1 college or university to your Common App. And once you've done this, you will release the FERPA statement. So just a quick overview of what the website looks like. So first, the profile is primarily full of your name, your demographics, other items you'll have to complete, and usually you'll complete these when you create or open your Common App account. So your address, your contact, demographics. They want to know what each parent or guardian, their background, your contact info. The Common App fee waiver, I'll just point out because it is there on the bottom, that is only applicable to students who maybe qualify for a fee waiver. If you have any questions about that, please ask your counselor. There's many times where we might be able to help a student out and assist with that. The education section, this is where you will enter basic facts about your high school education. This includes basic facts about Chatham High School, about if you have completed any college courses while you're in high school, if you have transferred colleges. You will also be entering all the courses you're taking here currently as a senior at Chatham High School. And to complete this information, you do need specific data from us. So, and this is available, this will be available for you to find tomorrow, so you don't have to write this down, but to complete the education section of the Common App, you must know that the current graduating class size is 283. The GPA scale is a 4.0 weighted. We do not rank our students, so you will choose none from the drop-down box. The only time we provide rank is when we provide it directly to certain institutions that absolutely require it, such as the service academies or certain scholarships at colleges. And in that case, if you have a scholarship or something that requires your class rank, I'm very sorry, we will not be providing it to you, but you can give us the contact information of the institution that requires it and we'll send it off. And finally, our title is school counselor. I just like to say that we're not guidance counselors. So once you've completed the profile and the education, the next step is to add a college. So again, this is really important for all students if you're going to be applying and you need your transcript sent out to college. So this has to be done even if you're not applying to any schools on the Common App. If you are applying to schools using the Common App, I do recommend at this step that you enter all the colleges you plan on using on the Common App, as that will become very important later on when you're submitting transcript requests to us. However, if you're not using any schools on the Common App, such as, I don't know, Elon or Georgetown, you can just choose any school. Just for example, on the screen, you'll see we've just randomly picked up schools by alpha in the search. Once you've completed these steps, you will then be able to access the FERPA statement in Common App. And FERPA, which stands for Family Educational Rights and Protection Privacy Act, what's very important to know about FERPA, and this is something I like to spend time talking about with my students because this is an important legal right that I think should be very respected. So what you need to know about FERPA is that once you have been accepted by a college or university and you've matriculated there as a student, if that college keeps recommendation letters in their admissions office, you have a right to access those letters. However, before you start the application process and documents are submitted on your behalf, this is where you would let your counselor, your teacher, and the colleges and your universities know all right up front if you're going to keep that right or if you're going to waive that right. So the thing is, though, it's not as straightforward as it looks. We do recommend that students consider waiving their right, and there's several reasons for that. First and foremost is that it builds credibility into your recommenders' letters. Second is that we've just recently learned that some colleges may not even read your application if you don't waive your right. So that's a newer nuance. The next reason would be, and I think the more ominous one, is that usually when a student doesn't waive their right, one thing that could happen in an admissions office is that they'll stop and wonder, why didn't the student waive their right? Was there something that went on at the school? Was there a disciplinary action? Are the recommenders withholding something? Are they not sharing anything? And finally, I know what I like to say to my students is that I see this as your legal right, so I really respect whatever you choose, and it will not impact what I write. There are some teachers that feel the same way as I do, but there are other teachers that when they see a student hasn't waived their right, they may feel uncomfortable. And it's not that they would have written anything negative to begin with, but now they just may not want to share too much. So that is essentially FERPA in a nutshell. So when you go onto the Common App, you are going to be asked to choose a right on FERPA. And in the same section, you'll also be giving you'll send me a release statement so that the colleges will be able to accept documentations on your behalf for your applications. So the place where to find the FERPA statement in the Common App, where you're going to find it is if you go back to your dashboard on your Common App, and the dashboard is where you've listed off all the colleges that you're applying to through the Common App. All you need to do is you just have to do this for one college, and once you've done this for one college, you've completed it for all of them. And here, for example, we've chosen NJIT. And when you click on NJIT or any of your colleges, you're going to go to a section called Recommenders in FERPA. It says Incomplete. You'll click that statement. That'll take you to another page. And up at the top part where it says FERPA Release, you're going to click on that Release Authorization. I would not click on anything else on this page, Manage Your Recommenders, etc. I would just click on this. And the reason why is once you have signed off on your FERPA statement, and you go through the matching process in Naviance, which Mrs. Coolbear is going to speak to next, it's going to connect your Naviance and your Common App accounts together, and these sections will automatically be pre-filled through the Common App connection. Okay.
Okay. Naviance Family Connection is a wonderful system that houses all of our career and college explanation information. And while there are parts of it that will be utilized by all grades at different points as they move through each of their grade levels, the primary use for Naviance right now for you guys is to be matching your Common App account with your Family Connection account so that the colleges that you are applying to can be filled into the system and the counselor and the teachers can expedite the letters of recommendation, the transcript, the school profile, and the secondary school report that the schools require. So as you know, if you go to our school website, that leads you to the shortcuts page on the right-hand side, and there is Naviance Family Connection for you to click on that link so that you can get to the login page, which when you log in with your username and your password, this will bring you to your home page of Family Connection. It's very important to keep that username and password handy, particularly because you will need it when you are in your senior conference with your counselor. What's one of the first things we ask you to do in the meeting is to log on to the system and log into your account specifically. If you have forgotten your login information, that's something you can see Mrs. Beatty for, and she can reset your password so that you can get a new one if you've tried several times and you can't log in because you've simply forgotten that password. A couple things I want to point out on this page before we move on. In the Pages section over here on the left, this is something that I highly recommend that you go back to at certain points in the process to help you. There is a lot of good information here, some of which we will cover in some detail tonight and then more specifically in the senior conference. But this highlights the responsibilities that you have as a student and what your parts are in the process and what you specifically are responsible for, how to start your process specifically, which some of the things that Mrs. Tully-Chano recommended through the Common App. And then there's a Common App guide specifically that will walk you step by step through that process as Mrs. Tully-Chano outlined tonight. There is also an application guide which might give some additional points about the application process itself, particularly if you have a non-Common App school and you are not specifically working on the Common App application for that particular college or university. So I highly recommend going through this Pages section and clicking on those links and reading some of the specific information that's in there because it's very comprehensive and detailed and will answer a lot of your questions ahead of the process. Over here on the right is the document library. I'll be referencing that section specifically in a later slide, but this is where you can find the majority of the forms that you will need to complete or reference as you move along. Okay, after you log in to Family Connection, you will be asked to go to the Colleges I'm Applying To section. You access that through the Colleges slide tab up here, and then you click on the Colleges I'm Applying To section, and that will get you to the area where we need to match the account from Common App to Naviance Family Connection. But again, before we leave this page, I want to point out something else here on the top right page, which is the upcoming college visits. I'm sure most of you know this already, but this is where we list all of our college reps and the dates and when they are coming to Chatham High School and the times that they will be available to meet with you. And also, that is where you go right up here where it says view all upcoming college visits. If you click on that, that brings you to the whole list and gives you the opportunity to sign up so that you can go to the session. These are for students, and when they sign up for a particular section, they will be asked to print out the confirmation page that is listed there so that they can get the teacher's signature from the class who they will be missing to attend that college rep session. If the college session is taking place during lunch or a study hall, that is not necessary, only for a actual class that they would be missing. Okay, so as I mentioned before, when you click on the Colleges I'm Applying To section, this will bring you to this page. There's more listed on that page, but for the purposes of showing you how the matching works, we blew up this slide a little bigger for you. And the other important thing, as I was mentioning with Naviance Family Connection and remembering your username and password, the same is true for Common App. You must come to your senior conference knowing your Common App email address that you use to log in, because you will be asked to generate that and put that in this Common App email address section up here. Now, ideally, as Mrs. Tully-Chano mentioned, if you completed the education section and the profile section and have done the FERPA release on the Common App side, then when you type in your Common App email address and hit the match button, things in a matter of minutes should link up and it should change to complete. Where it says incomplete up there, that would change to complete in a matter of a few minutes. If that doesn't happen, usually it will give you a little bit of a sign as to what the problem is that something didn't match, or a certain section wasn't completed, or the sections have been completed, but you neglected to do the FERPA release authorization. So that's something that, if that's all it is in the senior conference, if it's just completing that release form, we will ask you to log on to Common App and we will show you and take you back to where that FERPA section is. It can be completed just very quickly in the conference, and then we'll go back to this particular page and match up the accounts. Okay. I will talk additionally about what happens in the matching section of the Naviance slide in just a minute, but I also want to reference this particular page. This is in the junior packet that was referenced to you in your junior conferences last year. It's in the document library under the juniors link if you want to reference back to it, although it will be part of this presentation posted tomorrow. Regular decision, rolling admission, early action, and restrictive early action. The thing in common there with each of them is that they were all non-binding agreements. The differences are that regular decision deadlines will usually be somewhere around the January 1, January 15th, February 1, up through about March 1st, March 15th usually, with a notification date traditionally around the end of March, beginning of April. Rolling admission, there is usually no set deadline for that by the institution. They kind of accept the applications as they are submitted and review them and then turn a decision around in a few weeks. Usually the general rule of thumb with rolling admission is to apply on the earlier side because they continue to review applications as the volume rises and space is available, and then as that starts to fill up, it may be a longer turning around time before you receive a decision there from that particular institution. With early action, those deadlines tend to be anywhere around November 1, November 15th, December 1, and sometimes December 15th. There are some schools that have moved a couple of those up to October 15th or October 30th, and traditionally notification is somewhere around the December holiday timeframe. But again, that is a non-binding agreement. We know it is very attractive because it gives you the opportunity to apply to a school earlier and learn the decision earlier. However, it still gives you the freedom of choice for the schools that you are applying to, especially if you're applying to others as well. One of the things that we like to recommend about early action is that you reserve that for the top few choices, not necessarily apply to every single school on your list early action. We try to encourage students to think about that very carefully because when you are applying early, even though it's not a binding agreement, you are still sending a message to that school that you have a high level of interest, and you want that message to be clear. Then moving on to restrictive early action for a moment, because that is in the non-binding category. You can still apply early action to that particular school. However, it may restrict you from applying early action or early decision to another institution. However, the difference there is that it is a non-binding agreement and you will still be able to have the freedom to choose whether or not to attend that institution. Where early decision is entirely different is that it is a binding agreement and you only apply to one school and one school only in the early decision category, and that's because it is binding. I want to also mention here that there are some schools that have what is called an early decision 2 option, and you can consider that. However, you must be released from your binding agreement in the early decision 1 first if you do choose to apply that way. And that can happen 2 ways. If you are deferred from the early decision pool to the regular applicant pool, you are automatically released from that binding agreement, and therefore you might have a school on your list that does offer an early decision round 2, which has a slightly later deadline than that early decision 1, and you could proceed with that. You may not simultaneously apply early decision to 2 schools or early decision to 1 school and early decision 2 to another school at the same time. That is very important. And then obviously, if accepted, that is a binding agreement and you must attend. So again, careful thought goes into the early decision school. Okay, there are a few different icons that are posted up here on the screen. When your Common App account is matched with your Naviance Family Connection, the Common App schools that you have in your Common App account will automatically pull over to the Naviance Family Connection. Other schools that are not on the Common App need to be manually added, and we can show you how to do that in your senior conference individually if you do not know how to access that link to do so. And that's indicated by the middle icon, by the middle icon here, which, sorry about that, is a computer screen without the CA in it. So that's how you know that it's what's called a docufied school. And that is just a school that you will use their application to apply because it is not on the Common Application. However, like the Common Application, we can send your transcripts and your teacher letter of recommendation through Naviance because it will accept electronic submissions that way. And then the last icon here is the postage stamp, which, believe it or not, there still are a few schools out there that are what we call the mailed paper school in the traditional fashion. And those schools, we will mail the transcript and the counselor letter of recommendation to the institution if that is the type of school that it is. Mrs. Tolichano will be referencing a little later about the teacher recommendations in that process. But I'll just remind you here quickly that if you have a regular mail school on your list that requires a teacher letter of recommendation, for that institution only, you would provide your teachers with a self-addressed stamped envelope to the university so that it can be mailed directly to admissions. Okay, as I mentioned before, after the matching takes place, when we link up the Common App account to the Naviance account, this is the screen that comes up. And like I said, the Common App school will automatically pull in. So people will likely have multiple Common App schools listed here. We will show you how to add a non-Common App school, as in the case of Elon up here, which is a docufied school in the conference if need be. And then the mailed paper school is represented down here as Fairleigh Dickinson. So those are just to show you the three different types of schools that could be represented in your Naviance account. I want to go over some of these columns quickly, and I know that it's difficult to see from here, but the presentation will be available to you, as I mentioned. And this is also gone over in detail with your counselor in your senior conference as well. But you'll be shown how to make an electronic request for the transcript in Naviance during your conference. There is a specific way to do that. We also need to authorize the account that your parent has signed off on our Chatham High School release, which I'll be speaking to in just a minute, in order to be able to activate the account to make an electronic request for the transcript to be sent. When that occurs, the request, where it says no request in red, that will change to requested in blue. So the student will know that they correctly requested for the transcript to be sent electronically, that is, in this particular slide. Now, it is very, very important that you still fill out a transcript request form on paper in addition to making an electronic request. And I'm going to go into detail with that in just a few slides. But I want to mention here that it would be very helpful to us if you still make the electronic request on Naviance, because what's requested on Naviance should be consistent with what you're giving us on paper, so that there is absolutely no confusion about where we're sending the documents. In the next column here under office status, this is how you can track what the school counselor is sending. That entails the letter of recommendation, the transcript, the secondary school report, and the school profile. That's a package deal that all gets sent together to all of the schools, regardless of whether or not it is a Common App school, docufied school, or a mailed paper school. We will be sending all of those documents to the institutions. And when we do that, after you have submitted a transcript request, both electronically and via the paper form, when we send that out on or before the deadline, this pending status will change to initial materials submitted. So that's how you will know that the counselor sent out the proper documents to that college. Now, I will tell you that there are a couple of schools, as in the case of University of South Carolina, some of the California institutions, they are, and Rutgers as well, they are self-reporting schools, which means that students self-report their coursework and their grades. And so when you put those schools into Naviance, it automatically defaults to initial materials submitted. So I just wanted to clarify that because sometimes that has been confusing to some students. And we can discuss and clarify that situation for you further individually in your conference if that's applicable to you. Okay. In the My Application section, under this Have You Applied, that will go over in detail as well with you in the senior conference. But if you need to edit any information regarding how you're applying, early action, regular decision, rolling admission, if you need to identify whether or not you're using the Common Application for a Common App school, because sometimes a Common App school is not Common App exclusive, meaning you have a choice to use the Common Application or the application of the institution itself. Now, the college representatives tell us that there is no bearing on the case. You are encouraged to use the Common Application if it is a Common App school. That does not weigh in on the decision or the review. Really, the only exception to utilizing the application to the institution for a non-Common App school would be is if someone from admissions or someone that you've been in communication with specifically encourages you or tells you that you should use their application. But otherwise, it behooves the student to use the Common App because it's a much smoother and streamlined process. And then finally, in the results column, as you learn your outcomes to the decisions of each of the schools, then you should report that to us by stopping by and telling your counselor. We do love hearing personally from you regarding how things shake out, or send us an email or stop into the school counseling office and let one of the secretaries know, and we will update that particular column for you to reflect the results. The other thing that's really helpful here is just these last three columns. In managing communication, this envelope, just by clicking that, gets you emailed right to the admissions office. So if you have to ask a general question or need some information, it's right there. And then in the graph column, if you want to see the scattergram for that particular institution, that's also right there available to you. And this other icon right here is for the website. So one-stop shopping right here in Naviance. Okay, there's a couple additional documents that are very important, and these will be taken care of with you in your senior conference as well. The first is the CHS FERPA Transcript Release document. This is the same FERPA release authorization that is on the Common App. It's the exact same thing that you're signing. It's the same agreement. There's nothing different about it except that we need to have that on file in our office so that everybody working with you knows that permission has been granted to release the records to the institutions that you're requesting or for scholarship or otherwise, and that the FERPA, the right to waive, has been taken care of. And then the second document is the transcript request form, which is the paper version that I'm going to go over in just a minute. That's in addition to making the electronic request on Naviance. Okay, so how do you access these forms? In the document library on the home page, right on the right-hand side. And then when you go to the next page after you click the document library, there'll be a list of links. One will say forms, one will say juniors. It's in the forms link that you'll want to access for a variety of different forms, but namely the FERPA release for Chatham High School and the transcript release form down here at the bottom. So those, if you are being proactive, it would be extremely helpful if those are completed prior to your senior conference and you walk in with those documents taken care of. Not necessarily the transcript release, the transcript request form just yet, because we realize you may need some time to finalize your decisions and how you're applying, whether it's early action or regular admission. But ideally, the FERPA release, if that is brought to the conference ahead of time signed, that would help us a great deal. The other form that's important that's here is the early decision agreement form. If you are applying to a school early decision, that's the binding agreement category, you will be signing an early decision agreement on the application side, whether it's through Common App or designating that on a non-Common App schools application. But for us, we also need to know that you are applying early decision. And so we have our own form, which is here in Naviance, that you will sign, your counselor signs, and the student signs all together around the table to indicate that you are applying to that institution. And this way, when we learn the results, particularly if you were accepted to that early decision institution, the agreement states that you will withdraw all your other applications that you have out there, thus the binding agreement. So this is where you can access all of those forms. The other one that's here, which is also in the junior packet, and I'll just reference it quickly, is the parent questionnaire. Most of you have been really wonderful and very diligent about completing those towards the spring of last year and through the summer months. But if you have not yet had the opportunity to complete that, in many cases, it's not too late. That information is very, very helpful to us. It helps us personalize your students' letters of recommendation even more than we would already be doing, with helpful, anecdotes and nuances that you put in there. So that's appreciated. Okay, this is a copy of the Chatham High School release form. So as I said, it's the same agreement that's on the Common App side. The top part is where you are indicating that you give permission to release the records, and the bottom portion is where you indicate your right to waive. Please keep in mind, this is very important, that however you answer on the Common App side must be consistent with how you answer here. You cannot choose to waive on the Common App and then select, no, I do not waive here. So it must be consistent on both. Okay, this is the transcript request form that's in that form section that I just referenced. Now, this is something that you want to remember. And we said that it would be very helpful to do the electronic request and do the paper. But keep in mind that the paper has the power. That's what gets things expedited and on their way to the institutions on or before the deadline. However, as I said before, keeping the electronic request and what you put on this paper is to have them be consistent is really helpful so that there's no confusion in the process. At the top part here, you will indicate that it's for a college or a university. Then you will list the schools to which you are submitting a transcript request form at that point in time for. Now, this is a mixed bag. It's a student's preference, how they would like to submit the transcript request form. Some students will give us their early application, schools first, and then give us a subsequent transcript request for deadlines that are further out. That's certainly reasonable to do. The only stipulation or encouraging factor there is that if you're going to wait to do that, simply have the applications for the regular deadline schools ready to go. You don't have to hit the button yet because you may be waiting to see what some of those early outcomes are, but you don't want to have to take unnecessarily time in between when you hear and when the regular deadlines are. So you want to make it a situation where it's just a matter of hitting the button and sending the application out for those deadlines that are further out. However, if you're really ambitious and super organized and you know at the time that you're filling this out that you are applying to those schools that are on your list, regardless of whether or not they are early or regular decision, and it's important to you to kind of get that up off your plate so that the paperwork end of the process is behind you, you certainly can do that as well. The form takes up to 6 slots, so you can put at least 6 schools on it at one time. In the next columns over, you're going to indicate whether or not you're applying to that school early decision, early action, regular, or rolling. And then the application deadline column, this is highly critical. You must indicate what the deadlines are for those particular schools. And our recommendation is to have the school with the earliest deadline on the number 1 slot so that that early deadline stands right out to us, because that's the timeline that we're working in. We need to know how what the timeline is to make sure that we meet that deadline in order to put the finishing touches on your letter of recommendation and upload all the documents into Naviance so that they can be sent out accordingly. This column here under I completed the common application, that really should be interpreted as I am using the common application, which is a given for common app schools that are exclusive. However, for schools where you have a choice, It is very important for you to indicate to us whether or not you are using the common application for that school. Naviance needs to know where to send the documents, so that's why I mentioned that on a few screens back under the Have You Applied column, that you can adjust that accordingly for those schools, but you also need to indicate it here. The last column where it says application submitted, if by some chance you have submitted the application by the time you are submitting the transcript request to us, you would put a check in that box. However, you should never ever wait to give us a transcript request form simply because you haven't submitted the application yet. We need this minimum 10 school days in advance to process the request in a timely fashion. And ideally, that really means for the first submission, the one that has the earliest deadline date on it. Typically after that, once the letter is done and all the documents are uploaded, then it's ready to go for all the schools further out that have later deadlines. But that first submission should be a minimum of 10 school days in advance to assist us in getting everything out in a timely fashion. You'll want to check the box that you've signed the FERPA release down here, that your Common App email is matched in Family Connection. And then if you are applying to an early decision school, you would check the early decision box, and you should attach, if you didn't fill it out in the senior conference because maybe you weren't sure yet, you should attach our early decision agreement form to the transcript request. And then you put your name, your signature, the date, and your counselor's name, and you must fill out 2 copies of this. It does not have to be original. So when you fill out the transcript request, if you have access to a copier, just make a copy of it. If not, you do need to transfer the information onto a second document. 2 copies are requested because our secretaries, Mrs. Stetler and Ms. Lang, assist us in the tracking of the transcripts, and so they get a set and we get a set. So that is very important. Okay, and I've already reiterated the point that the transcript request must be 10 days prior to the earliest deadline you have. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Mrs. Tully-Chano, who's going to review the teacher recommendation process.
So for teacher recommendations, ideally in the spring of your junior year, we encourage you to approach 1 or 2 teachers to ask them if they would do the honor of writing you a college recommendation letter. If you haven't done that in the spring of your junior year, it's okay, but I would highly recommend that you jump on that now to make sure you ask a teacher. So there's several things that are important to keep in mind when getting your teachers ready to have their letters sent out the door. So first thing I highly recommend to my students before they do anything electronic is that they approach their teachers in person and just say thank you. That is something that is extremely important to remember. The teachers, they're not required to write your letters of recommendation. It's really an honor for them to do that to you. And for them to agree to do that, that means they believe in you and they're proud to write you a recommendation letter. The other thing I like to encourage students to say thank you in person is that nowadays, well, teenagers, we typically like to do, even people of my age, we typically like to do things over text or email and things of that sort. But I think the human touch is extremely important, and it can make a big difference, especially if the teacher has not written their letter yet. So after that, courtesy of following up in person, the next steps are all electronic. So the first thing is that what you're going to do is you're going to write an email that you're going to send to your recommending teachers, and the purpose of this email is to give your teachers explicit directions of what you need them to do and by when. So the first thing so there's pretty much 3 basic things in this email. The first thing you're going to tell them again is thank you. The second item you're going to note in the email is you're going to give the teachers a list of all the colleges where you need them to send your recommendation letter. On this list, you're also going to let them know if that school is Common App or not. And something else just to be aware of is that not all colleges require or accept more than 1 teacher recommendation. So I think it's really important that when you're determining which colleges you want your teachers to send letters to, you want to take note of which colleges require 2. So that would be a no-brainer. You'd have all your teachers, both teachers send letters to those colleges. But then you really want to pay attention to the schools that are emphatic about only wanting 1 teacher recommendation. There are some schools that are really pushing back on the amount of information or paper being sent them, so those are ones you really have to respect. Some colleges, if they only accept one teacher letter, they'll only take the first one in that's sent to them. So that's where it's important to determine who's going to be your primary teacher to send their letters to all schools and who will be the teacher who sends the second supporting letter. And finally, the third thing that you need to provide your teachers is you want to give them a deadline of when you need everything sent out by. And it is extremely important that you give them 3 to 4 weeks lead time. And you really want that to be 3 to 4 weeks in advance of your first deadline. Some teachers do write their letters over the summer, but I would say the majority of them wait until the fall. So that would be extremely important that you give them that lead time. Also, I can't tell you how many times over the years I've had a teacher come into my office right before maybe the November 1st or November 15th deadline and tell me, I just had a student give me a list of schools. They're asking me to send my letter tomorrow. And you know what? I haven't written it yet because I didn't know they were expecting me. So that's something you want to keep in mind. The 3 to 4 weeks will ensure that the teacher has time to write you a quality recommendation letter. The next step is to have your teachers connected to your Naviance account, because your teachers will be sending their recommendations electronically for you. And where you're going to do that, so you're back on the page of your Naviance account where you have matched your Common App, you have your list of schools. At the very bottom, this is where you're going to hit add, add teachers. So you'll click on that. And on this page, this is different from the email you're going to send your teachers. This is simply connecting the teachers to your Naviance account. You're going to choose the teachers from the drop-down box. And in the little message, I always recommend you say thank you again in your own words. It could be a basic thank you. I've had students do thank yous with exclamation points, happy faces, whatever fits you, that will work. And you'll hit update requests at the end. So essentially what will happen, I'm actually going to go back a screen. So after you've updated your teachers, you're actually going to see them added down here. And then there'll be another column here, it'll say status. Until the teacher sends out their letter, it'll say pending. But once the teacher has sent their letters out to your colleges, it'll say completed. The only thing that's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine with this is that when it says completed, it doesn't exactly tell you where they sent their letters. So if you're welcome to follow up with a teacher just to double check with them, but you can also ask your counselor, can you check to see which colleges or did my teacher send my letters out to all the schools? And that's something we can easily see behind the scenes in Naviance.
Okay, I have just a few more slides to kind of wrap things up. There's a lot of information that was shared tonight. As I mentioned, starting the presentation, we had a lot of screenshots on here. And, it's designed to be a reference for you to go back to look at, and to give you sort of an overview of really a lot of what's going to be covered in the senior conference. And, there are a few things that if you are in front of to begin with prior to the senior conference, it will allow that senior conference to really be focused on your needs at the time and be more personalized. So a couple last things to review is first, there are some responsibilities that a student has related to this process besides the completion of forms and the application online. So we have the completion and submission of the application and fees. That's the requirement of a student. It is also the requirement of the student to have their standardized test scores sent to the institutions that they wish to apply to. So that's contacting ACT or College Board to have those scores sent to your school. Contacting your teachers to request letters of recommendation would be a requirement of the student. And if there are any supplemental material requirements requested by the college, that would be the student's responsibility to gather those materials. And then the completion of the transcript request form and the CHS release. So those are the items that the students will take care of in the process. Our counselors to review will have a few responsibilities as well. The first will be to send the transcript, which will be an initial transcript at the application deadline, a mid-year transcript, and then a final transcript at the end of the senior year. Counselor will also write a letter of recommendation for the student. We'll send a secondary school report if it's required by the institution, and we'll send our school profile. None of these documents will be sent, however, unless a CHS release is signed and the transcript request form is received in advance. So to quickly sum up the steps in the process here, and really kind of brings into a review of what we covered during this presentation. Your step one is to select the schools you'll apply to in Family Connection. Set up a common application account. Complete the profile and education sections on common application. Select at least one school in the common application. Complete the FERPA in the common application. Match your account, your common application account and your Family Connection account, and complete the CHS release and transcript request form found in the Documents tab of Family Connection. These items can be completed prior to coming to your senior conference. If some of these items are not complete, you'll be taken through the steps during a senior conference, but having most of this done prior to the senior conference will allow that conference to be focused on some of the other aspects of the application process and really tailor the dialogue to what your questions and your needs are at that time. So the next step in the process, if you haven't set up your senior conference, is to get in touch with your counselor to schedule that conference. Please keep in mind that Mrs. Beatty is also available every day for students. She's found in room A110, but she's also available through email and can answer a lot of the questions regarding some of the tedious details of the application process or Family Connection or even the college search process and any of those steps along the way. And if you have specific questions, which I'm sure you do, there's a lot of information here tonight regarding your personal situation. We do recommend that you contact your counselor directly to get more of an individualized response. But having said that, at this time, we would be happy to answer some general questions from anyone in the audience. If anyone has a question? Sure. Yeah. The slides will be online by tomorrow. Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Is this on?
Yes.
Okay. While they don't specifically know, they have their ways of discovering that and finding that out. So sometimes it is just exercising good judgment and caution to really, reflect upon which are your top choices and only apply early action or early, obviously early decision to one school, but to send that clear message of demonstrated, interest to the school. That's not to say, and for those of you who have me as your counselor know that I sometimes say that despite that, we do support whatever the student's choice is, and we have had students who have applied to multiple schools in an early fashion, and we will absolutely support that. This is our recommendation to sort of think carefully about which ones you apply early to.
One thing I just want to add about early action that I think is really important to keep in mind is that if you're using early action to apply to a college that tracks your interest in them, it's going to be really important that you've shown interest in that school before you send in your application. So for example, by showing interest, it could be doing an official college visit, meeting the rep when they come to your high school, having done an off-campus interview, gone to an information session in the evening, send an email to the admissions counselor. That's going to be really important for the schools that track interest because a term I've heard admissions counselors use is that when the school tracks interest and a student has sent an application without showing that interest, they call that a ninja application because it's your first show of interest, and they do take notice to that.
To piggyback on that, as you're continuing to demonstrate interest in schools that you have a high level of interest in, and you're doing that correspondence or communication with admissions representatives or those that you may talk to when you go on a visit or later on, through email, it is important to be specific about what it is about the school that you're interested in. I would steer away from things like geographic location and size, and they have my major, because that's really a given. You know, you've already determined that, and that's why you're applying. So it's more about, they want to make sure that you were paying attention when you went to one of the visits, or something about a specific program resonated with you, or when you were walking through campus and there were a group of students off to the side engaged in a particular activity, you know, right down to what the, you know, school colors are. So anything that was meaningful or, you know, really attracted your attention about that school that was specific, that's what they want to hear.
Yes.
So when students apply early decision, you know, those deadlines are usually November 1st or November 15th. And the financial aid, the FAFSA process doesn't start. The first day for that is January 1st of the year your child goes to college. With early decision, when you're making that commitment to a school, you are saying that I will go, I'm so crazy about this place, I'm so excited about it, I will go no matter what. And that is, you are saying that as potential, I could be paying full freight if I have to. Some schools that offer early decision, they do have something in the fall called the CSS profile. That's a process. I can see you nodding your head. It's done through College Board. You have to pay for it. It will give you a sense of what your financial aid package might look like, but you won't truly know until you've gone through the FAFSA process.
Yes.
Yes, you can. As long as you're not applying restrictive early action somewhere, I do recommend for students, if you're applying early decision somewhere, to think about throwing in maybe some early action applications as well, just in case you are, you know, deferred or possibly, unfortunately, denied, you know, an early decision. So at least going into the holiday break in December, you have some acceptances in your pocket. The one thing you just have to keep an eye out for is if any schools have what's called restrictive early action. And that is where, you know, as Mrs. Coolbear said, they said that you can apply to us, and it's not binding if we accept you, but we prefer you not, we don't want you to apply anywhere else, early decision or early action. However, those schools, they're open to you applying to state schools, because they do recognize that their, you know, the financial aid process could come into play.
Yes.
Yeah, somehow behind the scenes, they can, you know, track that. Sometimes on the application, there is a section that asks students to identify where else they're applying. Now, typically that's for statistical information, to try and get a sense of, well, if students who have applied to us have also applied to schools like us, and that's what they are. So sometimes it's for that type of purpose that they may be asking. But they do have their ways of, you know, determining or finding out if you've applied to other schools in an early fashion.
I think I'll chime in on this one. I'll say that what I can say is that the world of college admissions counselors, it is pretty small. It's tight-knit. There's a lot of turnover. So I may see a counselor at one school for a couple of years, and then I see them at another school a couple of years later. So they know each other. But I will say that really the only time where I have seen a school really truly be aware and open of it, if they know a student has applied somewhere else, is, for example, it was a couple of years ago, I had several schools where I had students apply early decision to a couple places in Pennsylvania, several different students, and they had been accepted at all these places early decision. And then it was interesting, because then in about February, each one of them received letters from other institutions saying, congratulations on your early decision acceptance to X college. We're withdrawing your application. So.
Any other questions? Yes. So schools that you show interest in, sure. So schools that you are showing interest in, but are demographically too far away to be able to attend and aren't able to get out to them, some of the other alternative ways that you recommend to show interest and to make that type of contact.
Okay. Certainly, they understand when schools are at a distance and how difficult it is to, maybe get out there to visit. So other ways that you can demonstrate interest would be to contact admissions and see if there's alumni locally in the area, and then that alumni representative can meet with you. You could also, when the reps come to visit us here at school, your student can indicate, interest that way, maybe even ask to have a separate conversation one-to-one with that representative if there's a few minutes, remaining in the session, and to indicate, I'm just in a position where I can't get out to campus. However, I've been, researching the website. These are some of the programs that, I have, researched and I'm interested in. Can you tell me more about that? And then sometimes, they may make alternative arrangements with you to, find more information out about the school. Or so there are some times when schools that are at a distance will host like a satellite session at like a hotel conference center or something like that, and they might make you aware of those dates and times so that you can express interest and garner information from the institution that way.
One thing also, I heard you mention asking about signing up for emails and things like that. I do think that is of value for some schools, and they might track that. I will tell you, I was shocked to learn last year, I was sitting with one college representative who told me that not only will they track who has signed up for emails, but they track who opens the emails. That creeped me out. So that was something to just keep in mind.
Yes.
They usually will keep the application open for quite some time. I would say if it went months and months and months, before things continue to arrive, that there might be the risk of, the institution raising a question, are you applying, or, so forth, or they might, close it down. But that's very, very rare. It is not uncommon for pieces of the application process to arrive at different times. So whether you're applying early or regular fashion, if you're ready to go, you can submit your application. You can have your teacher send their letter of recommendation, us send the transcript, and go to College Board and ACT to arrange for the score reports to be sent. And they open up a file in your name, and they will continue to log in the 4 parts of the application until everything has been, checked in, and then it's considered complete, and then it rolls over to admissions for review. Correct.
Yes. So on the front page of our high school website, I'll have a link there for them. And then one of our goals this year is to increase the amount of communication in this area on our school counseling website as well, and using other mediums. So we will have within the school counseling page, it will be embedded in there as well as a checklist for the items that we mentioned here. And we will also be sending, once they are available, I will be sending school messengers out to the families, letting you know that it's there now. So, and I will get this up probably first thing tomorrow morning. Yes. Yeah.
Well, first, I think I mentioned that reserving those early applications for your top choices is the first consideration, but I think the other part of your question is trying to gauge whether or not, the likelihood of being a strongly considered candidate in that particular pool. Is that your question? I wouldn't say it's too many because, as I said before, even though we make a recommendation to try to reserve that for the top choices, we every year have students apply to multiple schools of their choice in an early fashion, and that has been supported. That's where the demonstrated interest piece comes in, and really it's incumbent upon the student to really be able to articulate that to the schools in the fashion in which we mentioned here tonight. So also, if you, on the school side, there isn't a single question that you can't ask admissions. So if there's ever a question about whether or not, you are in good position to be considered for candidacy in an early fashion, you can ask the admissions representative that by, just sort of running down what your profile is, and they give a preliminary response. They are very interested in wanting to help students maximize their, the possibility of being considered for admission. The only thing they can't guarantee is the admission itself. So they will advise you accordingly. And one of the statements that they may make is, if you are one of our top choices, we would like for you to apply early because it does deliver that message. However, there is a possibility that you might be deferred to the regular applicant pool. However, we will take into consideration that you applied early.
Yes.
Well, I think the soon as a student has their applications done, completed, I think that the earlier you can get them done and submitted, in my opinion, even though the deadline may not be for a while, it might be better off for the student, because the sooner the apps are done, that means the sooner the student can go back to enjoying their senior year and focusing on their academics. Because senior year grades from either first marking period or first semester are crucial to college admissions. So I would rather see a student get their applications done, nailed down, and out so they can go back to, life is normal and working on those grades.
Yes, the student designates on their application how they're applying, whether it's regular, rolling, or early. And so you absolutely may submit those applications and get them out. That doesn't matter if you do that ahead. And to some degree, if you're ready, as I mentioned this earlier, we encourage that because in addition to enjoying the senior year, it gets them back to business and gets the paperwork end of the process off the student's plate.
One more question there in the back.
Sure. The teachers will send their letters directly to the colleges. And they're signaled to do that. First, the student will add the teachers, they'll add their teachers to their Naviance account, and that enables that will then enable the teacher to send a letter on their behalf. And then the reason for that is the teacher, when they send out the letters for the student, they have their Naviance electronic identity. It's already been matched to their Common App electronic identity. But the teacher themselves, they send it out on their own. It doesn't come through the counseling office, won't be given through the student. And the email communication that the student sends to the teacher will tell the teacher exactly what they need them to do and by when. Does that answer your question? Yeah, typically what the teachers will do is once they get the list of colleges, the teachers write one recommendation letter, and they send that one letter to all the colleges. So once they get the list of colleges, they'll go on to Naviance and send that one letter out to all the colleges the student is applying to.
That's why articulating the deadlines are so critical in that email. I typically say to students, indicate the list of schools you're applying to and their deadline dates, and to bold the earliest one, because again, that's the time frame that the teacher will be working in. Once the letter is done for that earliest deadline, it's done for every deadline thereafter.
Okay, so I will have the slides up tomorrow morning. It'll be on the front page of the high school website, along with a checklist for seniors. And so I encourage you to contact your son or daughter's counselor to set up your senior conference, and contact your counselor with any more specific questions. Thank you very much. Have a great evening.